Hi, everybody. It's Amalia, founder of S.T.E.M Braids and Beyond and host of the Silver Bullet S.T.E.M podcast. Today, I have a dynamic duo. I can't wait to introduce you to. They're pioneering a space. And ladies, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Oh, thank you, Amelia, for inviting us to this podcast. First of all, I think you're phenomenal what you're doing in raising the voices for us in the STEM field. I think it's amazing. So kudos to you, first of all. So my name is Simone Ammons. I am the co-founder and CEO of COO. Prior to that, I spent many years as a process engineer. I have a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering and a master's degree in biomedical engineering. So I spent the majority of my post-undergrad years in the chemicals and oil and gas industry in Texas. So, it's Texas. Moving to the East Coast, though, after I got my master's in biomedical engineering to get into the pharmaceutical industry. So my most recent position, I was a process engineer at GSK GlaxoSmithKline, right outside of the city of Philadelphia. And right now, we're launching a product called QNUP. It's designed to help reduce equipment downtime and also boost productivity.
Oh, wow.
So hello, everyone. My name is Nicole Johnson. I am co-founder and COO of QNUP Inc. And we are, as Simone said, a startup here in Philadelphia, making new ground and equipment management and maintenance here in Philadelphia. My background is I went to HBCU in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, a UNC school called Elizabeth City State University. There I got my bachelor's in biomedical science. From there, I got I did my work in public health and spent a lot of time, a number of years working in public health in Philadelphia because I came here for grad school. So I worked at GPHA, Greater Philadelphia Health Action, and I started off as a medical case manager. So I started off with direct patient care services. Then from there, I had a small business where I did business consulting. So in that, how do you go from STEM to business? So I ended up going to get my master's, my MBA, and then I started, I transitioned that. So it's a funny thing how all things come together eventually. And so now I'm in healthcare management. So luckily enough, I was able to see the connections and what my work was and where I was headed in my career. And so I've been in healthcare management for the last, 10 years. I'm in healthcare management now. My most recent position before working with QNUP is I was the regional director of operations for a urgent care system here in the city of Philadelphia. We had we had 6 centers and we were slated to open up about 3 more before I departed from them.
Oh, nice. So what does a typical day look like? Because, my podcast is designed for the underrepresented community. And so some of the kids may not know what a CEO is and what they do and versus a COO. So do you mind sharing what each role does differently?
I'll start. My job as a COO is to make sure Simone looks good as a CEO. That is my job. As a COO, I help to do business operations and make sure that the operations are running smoothly so that when Simone goes out there and she does her part, she can do it seamlessly and not have to worry about, is the company falling apart while she's away? Is what's going on with the company? So that's kind of what my role is, Simone. So let you finish.
And a CEO, it's kind of a heavy title, but it started out as a founder role. So I founded the QNUP as a startup. It's interesting to mention that because prior to that I was a corporate engineer on the corporate floor, and so I was an employee. So I worked for different organizations for large Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies, and so that shift in that mentality from getting paid and getting that job and getting a good job because of my STEM background. So like I said, I have 2 degrees in engineering. However, it was still a shift to get into that founder mindset where you're just kind of like jumping off a cliff all the time. and basically putting your skin in the game. So in between, I was a technical writer. So for those of us who are, like Nicole said, you may struggle with numbers, but you understand concepts. As a technical writer, I'm bridging that gap where I'm describing very complex concepts in plain layman's language. So to your listeners, there are different avenues for you as a STEM background. The sky is the limit. But as CEO, though, stepping into that founder role, I basically created that very grassroots level of a software product. I had to learn to delegate. I think as women and as Black women, we're taught to be superheroes and superwoman with no sidekick. Batman has a sidekick, the Avengers, there's a whole bunch of them. But we're taught to just sort of fly by ourselves. So for me, starting that company was a lesson in getting on help. Bringing on Nicole was that big piece for me. Like, it's not about pride, it's about knowing your limits and knowing when you need help to soar higher. So our CEO is really about knowing what my limits are. I'm very good at engineering, I'm really good at numbers, I'm good at communicating that what I need in the software. But in other aspects on the business side, I think both of y'all's background, you all spoke a lot about business. It hasn't been my secret sauce, so why not bring somebody in to augment what I already have? And so as a CEO is making those critical decisions, learning where my strengths and weaknesses are, and pairing up with co-founders, with other leaders, business leaders, technical leaders, to make sure that the product itself represents the best of who we are as a company.
Awesome. So I want you to tell us the name of your company again and what it means. So one of the things I thought of as you were explaining is that Q is one of the letters missing from the periodic table.
You want to put it back.
I'm just curious. So go ahead and tell
so queued up. So as a process engineer, so it ties back into what I used to do. And during COVID, that was also true. I was the one getting called whenever a piece of equipment would break down on equipment on the production floor. And during COVID, people were at home, quarantining. And so a lot of the information, that tribal knowledge of the maintenance staff wasn't always readily available. But you're the engineer, you're supposed to fix it, right? And so I was like, where is that information? Is it buried in an enterprise software somewhere? Is it in somebody's email? The project engineer just left, quit, or sometimes it happened, they passed away, during the pandemic. And so just like you would use a QR code, that's a Q, that would take you to like a LinkedIn page or to a website. We're using the same technology. It's accessible. Most people have cell phones or any sort of camera-enabled device. So what we're trying to do is use the same QR code technology, but instead of taking you to just a single website, we want to take you to an equipment landing page that has information such as manufacturer, model number, serial number, date of installation, all of the things that you would need to actually start troubleshooting that piece of equipment. Before you can start opening anything, you need to know what it is. So just like you would give your car a tune up when you go to the dealership, the first thing they ask you, make and model, right? A Ford needs different work than a Toyota, a Jeep needs different work than a car. We want to do the same thing with your data and give your data a tune up. So that's what's behind the name, tune up.
I love it. So beautiful. So your job in STEM, was it your dream job as a child? If not, how did you discover it?
I'll start. I shared earlier, I actually wanted to become a nurse. Nicole shared about being in the hospital. I had asthma as a child. I was 10 or 11 years old, and it was the similar experience where I was in the hospital for extended periods of time. My mother, their children, right? There are other children in the house to raise. And I wasn't, they came every day, but I was still spending a lot of time in the hospital. Yeah. So that was my first exposure to like that healthcare system. And so I wanted to become a nurse and do that helpful thing that I was receiving on the hospital bed. I was born and raised in Dominica in the Caribbean. And so in that environment, my mother as a teacher, she encouraged me to even dream higher and look as medicine, like why not become a doctor? Like you're so good at the science subjects. It wasn't until after in high school back home, I worked at a brewery, believe it or not, and I was a lab assistant, and my manager there, Cuban connection, she's Cuban, married to a Dominican, and she said, why didn't you think about engineering? Because every time something broke down on the floor, I was the first one there. I was like, open it up, tell me what it is, what's going on, because of equipment. I was so excited about fixing and the thing, and like the actual process. How do we get from hops and sugar to beer? Like what was going on? And so I actually credit her for changing my mind from medicine to engineering. But I still had a bio bug, right? So I did my undergrad, I did chemical engineering, but I did my minor in bioengineering and math, my favorite subjects, biology and math. But then when I got the opportunity to go back more closer to where I initially wanted to be in medicine, I got my master's in biomedical engineering. So yes and no. I like fixing things and how things work. So it wasn't quite what I wanted to do when I was growing up, but it did fulfill that need for me. And then now in the pharmaceutical space where I'm still an engineer, but in that pharma space. So like I'm closer to like patient care, maybe a little removed, but still closer to that sort of biomedical space. I do feel more fulfilled where I don't have to choose between biology and math, between writing and numbers. I get to do both. So it's sort of like a full circle moment for me.
And Nicole, before you jump in, I actually wanted to point out something beautiful. Two things I want to point out. I want you to jump back in and see the difference between Dominica and Dominican Republic. Because
I love you already.
And
a lot of people.
Yeah.
Exactly. And for the brewery, what I see jump out there is that you ended up in chemical engineering, and breweries is mixing. So whether you realize it or not, you were like a mixologist all along. So just give a quick comments on that, and then Nicole jump on in.
Yeah, so I didn't even get to do my spiel because in Philadelphia, a lot of people are starting to recognize when I say Dominica, they know what I'm talking about. But in Texas, when I went to school in Texas, I used to have a map that I printed out, and I'll be like, Dominican Republic, Dominica, like there's a difference. So Dominican Republic history is part of Haiti, Hispaniola, right? They have a Spanish and African history. In Dominica, we have a French and British history. And the mere fact I don't say African speaks to how I was raised and how we're a former British colony. And for the longest while, we were taught the mothership, the mother colony is Britain. The queen is on our money. It is what it is. It is what it is. My mother, we gained independence in 1978. So my mother remembers going from a colonial governorship to like an independent country. So I was born to an independent country. So our language definitely changed after that, just to kind of go off tangent a little bit, where mother country is Africa, right? But languages, we speak English, and we also speak what they call French patois, which is very close to the Haitian Creole because of that culture. We actually lived in New Orleans for a little bit, so that mixologist culture, one pot, put everything, cook it up, is what we do in Dominica. And as far as the mixing, so in chemical engineering, I didn't even know what chemical engineers did until I like full circle there. It is really about mixing and getting the pressures, the temperatures, the everything right to get a final product. And so I've used that sort of mixing to see with our clients, what are we mixing and adding together to solve a problem for our client, for our key customer. I can make the software do whatever you want, but is it of value to our customers? For the beer, they like so much pH or color or whatever. What are we mixing on the front end so that the back end looks lovely? So it's full circle moments in a lot of different ways. But yeah, definitely Dominica, not the Dominican Republic, and chemical engineer.
Love it. All right, Nicole, go ahead.
Okay. So my background, when I was little, I found out I had sickle cell trait. And so I started being interested in that and what does that mean. I spent some time in the hospital, and I felt a little alone. My mother had other children. And so with that, you get your daytime visits, things like that. In between work, family comes by, but at night you're alone. And so, I started hanging out with my nurses like they were my friends. So I was lucky enough. I had one of my nurses as one of my sister's school, her classmates. So she would look out for me, make sure I was okay. So that made my mother feel better. But I learned then that I liked the hospital and I wanted to become a pediatrician. So I really didn't have any other life goal for a very long time. And I realized at one point, people start to attach themselves to your life goal if you don't watch it. And your dreams, and they call it rooting for you, but it's almost putting pressure on you. And so, I felt like when I decided I was in grad school and I decided maybe I don't want to be a doctor. And what does that mean? And so then you start to figure out, well, how do I tell this person? They're going to be so disappointed. And then you realize how much other people have sort of attached themselves to your dream. And so I learned then that sometimes people will be disappointed, but you have to do what's best for you. And so I kind of pivoted. And because I was in grad school at the time, I took a break from grad school and I was just like, I don't know if I want to do this. And so I, like Simone was saying, there's different avenues. So, you know, I finished undergrad. I got my undergrad in biomedical science. So I did all the steps going towards medical school. And then I said, well, let me take a year off. And my year off from undergrad before going to medical school, I was a real estate investor. So, you know, something totally different. Lived in DC for that year, made enough money that I paid for grad school the first year. And I didn't, you know, I was doing that. Then I got to grad school and I wasn't being fulfilled. I was getting a degree in microbiology, and it just wasn't fulfilling me. And I would go to work every day and I would enjoy patient care because I was a medical case manager. And so then I was like, well, what is it? And then I found out about this thing called public health. And I was like, well, that's the closest thing to business that we have in health right now. Let's do that. So I went there, I pivoted. And so I've learned that in STEM, you have to pivot, just like anything else. And there are plenty of ways to pivot. There are plenty of ways to get to where you want to go. And everything lines up the way it's supposed to. It may not feel like it at the time. It may not look like it at the time, because going from healthcare to going to get my MBA, it was like, well, why am I doing that? And it's like, I want to do business consulting, but no one's taking me serious because I have this, this biology degree and, this public health degree. So how do I make people understand that I do know what I'm talking about? Because a lot of the times, as women of color, you have to show people that you actually know what you're talking about. And a lot of times it takes you having the degree, not just the knowledge. So I did all the steps and, it did align in the end. And that's why I work in healthcare as a healthcare executive. And so, for me, and also a COO, I'm a chief operating officer. So I deal with the operations of the organization. So that's a little bit different. A lot of times we hear chief financial officer. Guess what? I can do spreadsheets. I can do finance. I do not like math, and I'm in healthcare. So it's possible, even with your likes and dislikes, you can find a space in STEM that works for you. You do not have to be a math genius. I have never been a math genius. And these things do work out the way they're supposed to work out for you.
I want to agree more. Love it.
I want to echo this comment where you said, I'm not good in math, but you were a real estate investor. And so
I'm good in finance. I can do a spreadsheet like nobody's business. So in my mind, there are different things. There are different avenues in math. I like physics. I like organic chemistry. I do not like algebra at all. Can't stand algebra. X and Y, I don't know who they are. But if you give me chemistry, I know that if you tell me that atom has a weight, the atom always has the same weight. Hello. I can get that. I need solid concepts, not things that are variables. And then for me, the numbers have to come from somewhere. There has to be a reason why that number is that number. In real estate, in finance, the numbers are based on dollars and cents, and I like dollars and cents. So I can calculate that. I can do a projection like nobody's business. So it's just, you have to figure out I have an undiagnosed dyslexia. I didn't find out about what dyslexia even was until I think I was in grad school. And someone's like, have you ever been tested? And I was like, no, never been tested. But, then I started doing, those tests you do yourself, like, oh, crap. Well, that explains a lot. But, your brain will adjust. Your brain will find ways of working around different things. And I think for me, had I known that, I might have really been a problem for you guys. But, it kept me humble, I guess. I can't do everything.
Something I'd like to pull out of what you said, and this is from shameless plug, the product I'm launching on Kickstarter, is that when I was growing up, I thought you had to be good at everything in STEM. You had to be good in every subject. And I actually broke it out into categories that some people are specialists, which is where you find what you're good in and stay in that lane. And some people all around it. And it's interesting that I specialize, my daughter specializes, and my son is like anything science.
Right.
You know, it's so that those kids to me in school would be recognized as gifted, and the kids who have specialties are overlooked because
Right.
we in the underrepresented community, we don't understand the difference between a child who specializes in a field in STEM versus a kid who is all around, you know, an all around player. Like even in sports, like there's some players who can play any
Right. Any
position.
position.
And then there's this one, I can't do anything but this one.
He kicks the ball. That's it. Yeah.
And
Right. Exactly.
it doesn't mean that one person is better than the other person. You just
Right.
find the thing that works for you. And that's
Exactly.
I'm trying to break.
I
So
love
let's talk a little bit about, change gears and talk a little bit about what your family dynamic was growing up. And pull out and share as much as you'd like or as much as you don't.
Yeah. So I was raised in America, I have to say, two-parent household, because that means something here, which breaks my heart. But my parents are married. My dad was let's say my mother honored that part of that bargain a little bit more. So that structure, and I was always in one house. Like I remember growing up and hearing people, I have to go to my daddy's house, I have to go to my mother's house. And some I don't know how your experience in the Caribbean, but some people are not raised by either. I have a cousin, she was raised by my grandfather, you know, and her mother was there, but she had a child for a different, person. And so the dynamics get, it's not unusual to have, parents in America trying to do it for their children. So I realized even there, I had a very stable childhood. It was one house, one mom, one dad. I didn't have to go between different houses. And so I think that stability made me, I wasn't stressed. I wasn't focused on different things. And so I could just excel, right? Because that's all I had to do. And so I definitely feel that helped me. I guess I should say, it didn't help me. It wasn't, my family structure wasn't a negative, is what I would say. Because you know how, like in America, hungry children can't learn. It's not that they're hungry. There's so many, and I'm realizing now there's so many societal factors that play into that. It's not just the child is hungry. Like, let's take it back a second. Let's take it back a bit. So I do credit my parents for giving me that structure to let me excel. When I was getting my master's, I called my dad. I was like, yeah, Dad, had a good pay, you encourage people, right? You had a good paying job, like what you doing, And I said, I was going to get my master's degree. He's like, well, why not a PhD, baby? Like, we need a doctor in the family, right? So I always had that. I always had my biggest champions were my parents, and I credit them to this day for like evolving me, shaping me to who I am today.
Yeah.
So I grew up, first, I was born in Brooklyn. And then my mother and my parents realized that it just wasn't going to work for them. And so my mother decided to move us down to North Carolina, where her mother grew up. My grandparents had, because my mother was born and raised in Brooklyn. And her parents had moved back down to, my grandmother moved back down to North Carolina. And so my mother realized that she wanted to support because, being a single mother in the city, we're leaving out in dark and coming back in dark from daycare, her shuffling everybody, then, making dinner. And, I did see my father on the weekends and things like that, but she moved us. And it's funny because I remember the transition. I remember us moving. I remember saying, I want my daddy once in my life. And my mother's like, here's the phone. So, I got to talk to him. But that's next summer, I was right back in New York with my father. So for me, it became summer vacation was really a vacation for me. Because I had, my sister and I were called the best of both worlds. We had our good education in the South, our seriousness in the South. And in the summers, we could have fun in the city. Nobody else is going to New York and my little town but us. We come back with the best clothes, the best shoes. Now that's how you start your new school year. So that's kind of how I grew up. That's kind of how I grew up. And I can honestly say that, my mother was a single working mother, but I never felt poor. My grandparents were always around to support us. My grandfather was my biggest champion. I can honestly say there was nothing my poppy, if he said it, then I could do it. I was sure I could do it. Poppy said it, it could be done. And that's kind of how, I live my life, knowing that I can do anything. And so, Simone, when you talk about the negatives of growing up a certain way, the social determinants of health, so to speak,
Right.
I didn't have to worry about those things because I had the support that I felt like, I needed. So, I didn't have those problems, but my father does have 13 children. So I am one of 13 from my father. But he did have the decency, to marry everybody's mother. So my siblings ages range from about 60 all the way to in their late 20s. So we span. And the thing is, I had a really great stepmother. And she was really supportive, and she really made sure that we knew each other, and we were free to come to the house and see each other. So they got married when I was still doing my summers back and forth, and she kind of just fit in with the family really well. So I think I've always had the support that I guess I needed, as far as emotional and growth. Sometimes academic. My mother did not complete college until I was in grad school. But she's always owned businesses, and our businesses happen to thrive, thank goodness. So it wasn't a matter of know-how, it was just a matter of not having that degree. And my father, he finished with a GED. He worked for the Parks Department in New York City, so he didn't have that education thing. He enjoyed that we were smart, but couldn't necessarily support us in it. But even with that, I feel like there's enough support in other areas that I got the freedom to study how I wanted to study. And I think that that's sometimes just as good as a parent who knows, exactly what you're doing. I also had my biology teacher in high school was a Black woman. And I think that was something that it was a whole group of us. So by the time I got in high school, I finally got into advanced classes, finally. But it was because there was just 3 different tiers. It wasn't necessarily advanced, but you were in advanced because they had they broke the school up into job tech, and I can't remember the other one, but it was college prep was the highest level. So luckily, all the people who were in my classes but got to go out to the AG classes, the academically gifted classes when I was in elementary school, they had to stay in class with me finally, because I knew I was going to college. It wasn't a question. It was something we had to do. And so when I finally got in high school, I felt like finally I'm around my peers. And I think that helped. But then at the same time, I got access to different teachers who were, I think, more motivating. And, then I had a high school that had a Black woman counselor. I think that was one thing. I had a Black woman drama teacher. And I think that was one thing because I was I'm a little shy sometimes, and just speaking in public, I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And I remember she made me do the poem for Black History Month, Phenomenal Woman.
Wow.
And so we performed that so much that I was like, well, maybe she's not lying. Maybe I am. Okay, so it's like you recite something enough. It's like, well, you know what? There's something to this poem. So, and like her thing was she saw the growth in how I started reciting the poem. And then by the time we had finished, how I kind of was owning it a little bit more. And I think those things were the things that kind of probably helped shape me, not just my background. I think I'm just a product of that village. For me, I think it was the village. And I had a mother who was not intimidated by me having a village. She appreciated me having a village. She encouraged me to have a village. One of my people in college, I remember she had me come in to speak for a S.T.E.M program that she did. And when I graduated, I came back to speak. And I didn't think I did anything special. I was like, oh, I just finished college. And she was like, but do you understand? You finished college and now you're in grad school. And I had to think about it because in my high school biology class, we all said we were going to be in science. We all said we were going to go in medicine. Wow. I am the only person who stayed in S.T.E.M. Everybody else has been since done other things, but I'm the only person that stayed in S.T.E.M. So after I talked to her, I had to go and talk to my high school biology teacher and just tell her thank you. And so she was amazed. She was just like, I just really can't, she's like, you remembered me from, I was like, I just wanted to thank you because those people really paved the way to make me who I am. And I even had a great mentor here, Judge Magistrate Carol Sandra Wells here. She's the first Black woman magistrate in Pennsylvania federal courts. And I remember I got a chance to meet with her, and she would just let me come in. And I thought, I went to law school for a year because I thought, well, maybe law, maybe this is not what I'm supposed to be doing because it felt so hard for me, maybe law. And she let me sit there and write on cases and just do some different things in her office. And I realized that, you're allowed to try some things to figure some things out. And I don't think that in America is always encouraged. You're supposed to get on a path, stick with a path, especially a person of color, and stay on that path. And if you keep pushing, you'll get that job. And once you get that job, you stay there 30 years. And whether they appreciate you or not, you got a steady paycheck. So you keep that steady paycheck. And so luckily, I have people around me that realize I might be a little bit different. So we're gonna let her be okay and just pray for her. So I think that kind of support is really what's helped me.
So I want to share a statistic about changing your major. I changed mine twice. So I'm in that circle, but the statistic is 75% of college students change their major at least once. So there is this thing like, oh, you're changing your mind, but it's 3/4 of the people who do college change. So it is more normal than that.
Abnormal. Yep.
And figuring it out is part of the journey. You know what I mean? So what do you wish you knew sooner about STEM? In hindsight, what do you wish you knew sooner? Is there anything?
For me, as an engineer, I came to the US when I was 20 with an academic scholarship to chemical engineering. And then within weeks, I was getting asked, well, are you running track or are you in sports? And no, I have an academic scholarship. So I was, it's been, quite, 2 decades since then, but the fresh off the boat, I'd never had an immigrant experience because, I'm perceived as Black. And it was confusing in the beginning because I was like, well, I'm Dominican, like you're an American, right? What's the problem? But so I had to quickly learn what that meant in America. And to your point, you think you were saying earlier, like, having not been born in the US, like I recognize I have a very different mentality. Like Nicole talked about a Black teacher. No, all of my teachers were Black, right. And they weren't Black, they were Dominican. Like, why would everybody's Black? Like, why is there a box for me to check? Right. And I mean, Black like me, like dark skin. Like, we do have colorism, right? Don't get me wrong, right. But like my principal was dark, beautiful lady, dark and lovely. And I had other teachers who were, more what do we call Creole, but they all were my teachers. So that experience, I feel, shaped how I view myself. And I think I wish I knew not everybody had that. And I wish I knew the difficulties. The engineering for me was easy. The politics and the proving myself every single day to the security guard. We got a new security guard. I get questions. I work here. Oh, you must be with the clinic. No, I'm actually with the and so it's just the everyday. It's exhausting. And so as an entrepreneur, I do get to step away a little bit. It's showing up in different ways. We're quickly learning. It showed up in different ways. But I wish I don't regret my decisions, but it was just so hard because I just didn't know. Like, it wasn't necessarily about my academics or my professional expertise. It was in the wrong body.
Right.
So
yeah, I agree, Simone. I find that sometimes it's not even about STEM. It's just about people's perceptions and interaction with people that's harder than anything. I think sometimes, like you said, Simone, it's just the wrong body. They're not expecting it. I've been in a job interview before and I've walked in and they're like, "You're Nicole Johnson?" And I'm like, well, I thought, yeah, no, what do you want exactly? Like, but funny enough, I lived in Tanzania. Working in business took me to Tanzania. And I remember when I was living in Tanzania, I did have an experience where someone asked me, how did I get there for work? And did I go to you must have went to a good university. You must have been to some big white university. So that was the perception. If I was in Tanzania working, if I went to another country to work, I must have went to a big name university. And at that time, the only place I had been, well, I hadn't finished at Jefferson because I took some time off at Jefferson, but the only place I had been was at Elizabeth City State University, which is a UNC school, but it's an HBCU. So it gave me the opportunity to educate people in another country about what an HBCU was, because we've been working for a very long time to educate our people. And so, you know, it was a little disheartening, but at the same time, I knew that, you know, part of what we do is educate people. We're, you know, as women of color, if we're in a space, just our presence is an education to people. And so I kind of have to look at it that way and understand that it's not intentional bias. It's not something they need. It's just something they're not used to seeing.
I love what you said. Our presence is an education to people. Oh my God, we need to put that on a poster somewhere. We need to copyright that right now. Write that down.
We're gonna have to just put that. It belongs to QNUP, okay? Okay. So we'll copyright that along with everything else. We copyright it.
To your point, HBCU. My husband is a Tuskegee grad, and I again learning, right? Like on campus, I was exposed to the Divine Nines, the Alphas, AKs, and I was like, wait. 1901, 1800s, you mean Black people have been educated for hundreds of years? Like where teachers, midwives. So I always tell people the same garbage on the 6 o'clock news gets viewed outside of America. So that's what Blacks outside of America consume. You have to learn and want to learn. There's a difference. And actually everything is just lies. It's not even different experience. It's just a lie, right? Just a lie.
Or not a lie, but just a variation of the truth.
It's warped.
It's a narrative. It's a narrative.
Warped. And so to your point about STEM, so in Texas Tech, I was still part of the National Society of Black Engineers, and part of that was as college students would come back to high school students. To your point about mentoring students, I've been doing that my entire life. And there was, depends on what side of town, the railroad tracks, right? I thought it was just a euphemism, but it's real. Depends on what side of the railroad tracks you lived at on Texas Tech. Like you went to, you know, the biggest school. I went to Texas Tech, but you would go to UT Austin, or you would not go into college at all. And then we did what they call a walk for education in the hood, which is what I was told. A good Black like me isn't, you know, you don't belong there. What does that mean? Again, right? Cultural assimilation. But then we walked, and it was just grandmothers and parents and mothers just trying to do right by their children. So everything that I had seen and consumed I was like, okay, let's throw it away. Let me talk to these people. And it was a mind-opening, mind-blowing. And I feel the lack of knowledge and the lack of conversation and transparency around different groups keeps us separated for no reason. Because if we knew our power as a people, as a diaspora, as a group, would be scary. Would be unmatched.
So that's what my podcast was going to be about when we were talking earlier. So that was, and the name of the podcast would be Diaspora.
Yeah.
So.
You know, because I work in the STEM space, I get a lot of questions. And one of the things that I'm often asked is, what is the reason for the separation we have? And because most of the Black population live with minimum wage jobs, it is hard to work together if everybody's suffering and hungry.
Nobody's working. I can't work with you if I'm already working. I gotta go to work. I don't have time to talk about this. I gotta go to work. Literally.
It separates the community. And so I believe that when the shift comes and the economics of what it means to be Black shifts and changes, the togetherness is gonna shift, because now we can breathe, you know? Now we can pause, and I just see a beautiful future for us. But something I want to comment about that both of you just said, it wasn't a dream you knew you could have. That's actually a line from Taraji P. Henson after she did Hidden Figures. I didn't know the history of the astronauts. I didn't realize it was a dream I could have. She actually went to school for electrical engineering and dropped out. So the reason for this work is so that people who look like us can have this dream and this unicorn syndrome It's what? Okay, anyhow, before I get off my house.
Well,
Go
see,
ahead,
luckily
go
for
ahead.
me, my school my school has been around since 1891, which is still young for HBCU. But
Correct.
because I grew up in the area, I was in Upward Bound, so my weekends were spent at my university. So
Right.
I was in
It's that exposure. Yep.
math educational network. So before Upward Bound, I was in that in junior high. So I was always going to the university I ended up at for math and science educational things. And that's the things I love to do it. My mother was like, "Well, there you go." She knew where I was on
Get
Saturday,
after it.
so that was easy. So for her, encouraging my academics was easy because as a single mother, it's she doesn't have to worry me trying to figure out how to shuttle me back and forth to sports. Although I did play sports, she didn't have to worry about where I was as a girl and what is she doing, things like that. So I think that for me, knowing that, you know, getting that history from in home. So African American history, I was taught before they started teaching in school. I was taught that in home. I knew there were black cowboys. I knew what Buffalo Soldiers were.
Okay.
So when I moved to Philadelphia and I found out they rode horses in the park, I went through the phone book. Yes, that's how old I am.
Don't
I
date
went through the
yourself.
phone book, girl. I went through the yellow pages of the phone book. It was only yellow pages, though, but I'm not that old, so it's only yellow pages. I went through the phone book and I saw, because I wanted to ride, I wanted to go riding, horseback riding. And so I saw William Pickett Riding Academy. Well, had I not had that education about African American history, I would have not have known that William Pickett was a Buffalo Soldier and this must be a black place. So I
Buffalo
called them. I
Soldiers.
called
Yes.
them
In the
and
heart
because
of
I called them,
America.
I started, volunteering at the stable, the William Pickett Riding Academy in Fairmount Park, and I got to ride horses in the city. And the number one thing they did was, shameless plug for them, but they used to have a program with the Temple Police Department where they used to teach inner city children how to ride. And Philadelphia has a big black cowboy scene, and that's one of the histories of Philadelphia. And so, being able to help kids do that, that was really, fun. And it's kids like me. So it's about, I think, knowing how to give back, when to give back, and realizing that giving back doesn't always look the same for everybody. But that brings me to a point about QNUP.
Yeah.
Our wonderful founder has a bigger goal for QNUP. So yes, we want to become one of the largest software companies. Yes, we want to make sure that we're able to tune up your lives. But on top of that, our wonderful CEO has a bigger mission.
So part of what we want to do is offer paid internships to engineering students at one point. I was a recipient of one at Texas Tech, and it was that networking. It was a former Texas Tech student who was working at a company on the Gulf Coast who brought me in. And I mean, yes, I had the academics, but a lot of that was that network. And so it allowed me, I didn't have a car, I didn't have anything, but allowed me to have housing and feed myself and participate in a career changing internship where that is when I was like, oh, I can do this. I can do engineering in a professional setting. So that's something where a lot of times, even when you get the college degree, that's just one rung. That's not it. It's not even the end. Like you talked about earlier, it's a journey, right? And so we want to be able to allow engineering students, Black and brown engineering students, to have that stepping stone, have that real world experience, have those things that other people take for granted. And of course, I want to target HBCUs. Some of the other bigger universities here in Philadelphia have a lot of those programs. I don't hear about Temple, a lot of our students go there too. So I just want to make sure that as we grow, like Michelle Obama said, we're taking a couple people with us as we break glass ceilings. Like we're all going to be breaking glass ceilings together.
Perfect. So to honor your time, I want you guys to both share a book or a movie that reflects something in STEM that inspires you.
We talked about Hidden Figures. I watched the movie and I was, well into my career at that point. But that scene where Taraji P. Henson walks in and gives them the formula that saves the day, and then they close the door, resonates with me so much because they take our talent, they take our genius, they take our everything that we bring, but they shut the door. You're still me. I'm still not welcome past the door. We just want what you have. Thank you very much, and let's go. That moment still, it resonates. It helped me understand what I've been going through in different jobs, even as an entrepreneur now. I think that movie, Katherine Johnson, I think the people out there celebrating. It hurts that the title is Hidden Figures, but it is true. And their figures, they're bigger than just who they are. They represent, to me, a legacy. I love that movie.
Wow.
So for me, I am a health equity champion. I believe in reducing healthcare disparities. That's part of the things that I've always been for. So the Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. Henrietta Lacks is mine. I don't know if you guys, I'm pretty sure you have an educated viewership, but Henrietta Lacks was a woman who had cancer, and they have been using her cells in perpetuity.
Yep.
Right, to help heal and study cancer and do cancer research. She nor her family have ever been compensated until recently, thank goodness. So luckily, just recently, her family finally won a lawsuit that had, and it's acknowledged how much her cells have been used, but it didn't happen until August 2023. And so it's something I'd known about. And so when the movie came out, it was just awesome to me, because for me, healthcare, this is the epitome of what healthcare inequity looks like. Because had it been anyone else, they would have been compensated royally. And there's been so much research done. It's to the point people are like, well, you can't even say it's her own cells. How do you know it's cells? But I'm just like, okay, we are dealing with genetics here. We all know it's her cells. So it's like the same science you're using is the same science you're trying to use to convince us it doesn't exist. Okay.
Hello.
So, but again, that's what they do to people of color, especially women. And that's the thing. It sort of shows me this is why I fight for health equity. This is why I care about how patients are being taken care of. This is why I want the most knowledgeable and educated, and not just educated in education, but I will train you to be the best in what it is you're supposed to do, because I want the patient to have the best experience. I want you to understand what healthcare disparities look like when you're dealing with a patient of color, so that you'll not, and trauma-informed care is a very big thing for me as well. And I feel like no one did any trauma-informed care when dealing with the family of Henrietta Lacks, because they tried to dismiss them in a lot of different angles to say, oh, it was really nothing. There was really no real contribution. They've been through trauma. They've already lost their mother. They knew that it had to be important because you kept using the cells, and yet they just dismissed them. And you can't dismiss hurt people that way. They can't heal. They can't move on. And it's our job as the human race, I feel, is just to care enough about other people. And sometimes we don't. And so that's why this is my movie. That's my movie.
The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. One of the things I want to point out as we close is that because the family was not educated on STEM and sciences, they didn't even know how to advocate for themselves. So before the movie came out, I've always been a very avid reader. I was reading the biography that was written on her, biography, and I kept. This is literally part of my STEM journey. I kept asking, why didn't somebody in the family speak up? But they didn't even know what it was.
They didn't know.
When the movie was filmed, I understood it where the daughter was. I think there was a conversation, or maybe it might have been an interview I saw about it, where the daughter, when the cells had gone to space, the daughter was asking, "Does that mean that what does that mean?" Understood. Is she still alive? And that is it's like,
but no one took the time to even educate them on what. But at the same time, that goes back to trauma-informed care. I'm going through trauma. Right now, I'm my mother, and these are parts of my mother. But what does that mean? And no one took the time to even explain. And so you're just re-traumatizing people who are already traumatized. And that's what healthcare does sometimes. And I can't say it's always intentional. Sometimes, especially when, let's say the mother was still alive and she has cancer, and we got to move, we have to make the decision now. Sometimes it's not intentional, but those unintentional things still have effects on people. And we have to take the time to understand that patient education, family
Yeah.
patient education is necessary. And that's sometimes the things that we lack here in healthcare. And those are the things that hopefully, we can change just by having conversations like that. We can all understand the difference in, education versus I told them.
Absolutely.
And I can just to get this a little person I can speak to that. Actually lost my mom 5 years ago. And it was grief counseling and grief therapy and realizing that super mom had to sit down and just cry.
Right.
That took me through that. And it's like, what do you mean my mother's dead? And I thought that was the end. But then through, like you said, trauma-informed therapy, I learned that I am my mother's legacy. Like I'm here because she was, right? So as a teacher, even what I do, even what I do as a technical writer, where I'm actually teaching people, you grow up and you don't want to be anything like your parents and you turn into them anyway. And so even being in that space where I'm echoing my mother all the time allows me to like close. Maybe you don't ever heal from that, but it helps you to ease the wound, the pain. And so that's so powerful what you said, Nicole, about trauma-informed care. And so the big part of what I'm doing is I am my mother's legacy. I am carrying my mother's legacy to my children. And then she doesn't need to be here for legacy to be effective, but it is because I am. So thank you for sharing that, Nicole. It's powerful.
Okay, my last question. What is STEM to you? And then remind everybody how to get in touch with you. I'll also leave the link in the bottom of the video, but what is STEM to you? And and how anybody can get in touch with you guys.
Yeah, so STEM to me is the definition I learned in college. I put it because I'm an engineer. Engineering equals a problem solver. So solving problems. You can use math, analytics, science, organic chemistry, like different things to solve the problem. It can be complex, but at the end of the day, you're solving a problem. And then as far as getting in contact with us, the name of the company is Tune Up, like a tune up or with a Q, QUNEUP.com. And you can reach me on LinkedIn as well, Simone Ammons on LinkedIn, and just go to the website, tuneup.com. Everything you need will be there.
Awesome.
What does STEM mean to me? I had a hard time answering that, but I think what it means to me is the ability to explore. I think for me, my career, my journey has been exploration. And being sure science, math, engineering, there's a formula to everything that's in that. So while the formula doesn't look the same for everybody, doesn't mean the end process is not going to be. Like, I know the new math now is, you have to do it this way. Well, luckily for me, I grew up in a time where you just had to get the problem right. It didn't matter the formula you used. It didn't matter what you did. If you had the right answer in the end, you had the right answer. And I think that's what STEM is for me. It's about realizing that there's different paths to different things, but in the end, you're going to get to where you're supposed to be. And so I can be reached at LinkedIn, and it is Nicole. Mine's is Nicole Johnson, MBA 001. So I am the first Nicole Johnson in my family with an MBA, so I gave myself 001. So I created mine. So it's Nicole-Johnson, MBA 001 on LinkedIn. Also, I am in Johnson at QNUP.com. And of course, you can go to our website. There's a contact link there for us. Also, if there are any customers out there, because I'm always on my job. So if there's any customers out there who'd like to learn more, you can also set up a consultation with QNUP.com. So thank you so much for your time. It has been a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Okay, guys, we're signing off with this session. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.